afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing? Did you like the keynote? Yes. Good breakfast? All good? Awesome. We want to make sure that you guys are happy. My name is Mila Krivoruchko, and I'm a lead product manager at Zoom. Today, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about our partnership with Slack. At Zoom, our mission is to empower users to do their best work with best tools. And we integrate with a lot of best-of-breed solutions to make sure that we give you all the tools that you need to empower your collaboration and streamline your workstream communication. We have a lot of partners, of course, but there is one partner that is very special to us. And this partner is, of course, Slack. It's no secret. Why is Slack special to us? Well, not only two companies, Zoom and Slack, are similar in size, we operate in the same industry, which is communication, unified collaboration. Not only we share a customer base, a lot of you are in the audience, so thank you so much for using both Zoom and Slack. But even more importantly, we share principles and values. Principles like focus on user experience, platform-first approach, and security and scalability. Why is user experience important? Well, when it comes to communication, something like sending a quick message to somebody or starting a video chat really quickly, the communication needs to be easy and frictionless. You want it to just work, right? When it comes to platform, IT managers are overwhelmed with so many different apps that sometimes don't even talk to each other. So it's really hard to configure, hard to enable. And it's very important for best-of-breed solutions to integrate, but not only to integrate, but provide a seamless experience. So once you're a user, for example, authenticated, doesn't need to go and re-authenticate and re-authenticate and re-authenticate in order to get their job done. And security and scale matter because as your organization grows and scales, it's very important to have a reliable communication solution that just works and can scale as your company grows. Well, Slack and Zoom streamline internal and external communications. But what does it actually mean? And actually, our companies go way back. I mean, in startup terms, way back means maybe 3 or 4 years back. Slack, actually, and Zoom, we worked together on the integration. The very first integration happened back in 2015 when Slack launched their app marketplace. And Zoom app has become, since, an essential app featured on the Slack marketplace. We've had an incredible success with this integration, and we invested a lot of resources to make sure that we stay up to date with newest, latest, and greatest Slack developer tools and APIs, and take advantage of those and bring you, our customers, the best experience from this integration. Later, we'll show you what exactly we have in store, something that we recently launched and also something that's coming. But first, I'd like to bring on stage a very special guest who drove all the way from the exotic San Francisco. I would call it a planet, so, since we're in this theme, out of this world. Please welcome Don Barron.
Thank you, Mila. How are we doing with the mic? Doing great? Okay. Thank you, Mila, for inviting us to speak at Zoomtopia and for bringing us along on this intergalactic journey that is Zoomtopia. When I was a kid, I used to really love astronomy. I had a telescope. I would point it at the moon and the stars. So I'm delighted that finally, decades later, I get to present at an astronomy conference. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. But you might be surprised to learn that Slack has actually had quite a bit of an impact on the world of astronomy. For example, this article asks, Did Slack help NASA land on Mars? Spoiler alert, we did. Or how about this wonderful piece of clickbait headline here? The Slack chat that changed astronomy forever. I added the forever part. I thought it sounded cooler. Anyway, basically we changed astronomy forever. No big deal. But the question is, for a lot of us have in mind, is what is Slack and why is it so important? And why are people like Ben, who should be focusing on landing a robot on Mars, actually spending all of his time in Slack channels? Well, at Slack, we're working on developing a new way of working in the enterprise. And this is our vision, and this is what we think about every day. How do we transform how businesses communicate internally and externally? But when you really dig deeper and to make it simpler for everybody, Slack replaces email inside your company. And why? So I remember the first time I used email. I've been using emails for decades. I was going to ask for a show of hands of people who use email, but I didn't want to be gratuitous about the hand raising. For email especially. But when I first used email, it really changed my life. I was able to send a message to another person anywhere in the world, instantaneously receive a response back, and have a great one-on-one conversation with that person. That model doesn't really scale when it comes to working on projects or working with bigger teams. For example, your inbox is really entirely dependent on who reaches out to you, who sends you an email. Imagine you have a team, somebody forgets to include you, and suddenly you don't have any of the context that people are having in this thread. Or imagine if you're a new employee. What does your email inbox look like if you've just started at a company? It's empty. You don't have any access to that rich data that's been stored as part of that's been archived as your company's communication, messaging or internal comms for that whole time you've been in email. Nobody has access to that. They have an empty inbox when they start. And it's also prone to tremendous sprawl. So you don't need to be a Fortune 100 CEO to go away on vacation for a week and come back and see a total mess without prioritization or indication of where you should start, and you're spending days trying to clean out your inbox. And finally, it's not the most secure way to communicate, right? Not only are there things like phishing out there, but in general, email doesn't do a great job of limiting what information you can share and with whom. So at Slack, we have a different approach. We organize all internal and cross-functional communication in something called channels. So channels are ways that you can organize the collaboration of your teams within Slack. You can organize them around accounts that you're trying to sell to, development sprints that you're working on, marketing campaigns that you're running. Really, any time that there's a cross-functional, collaborative experience in which you want to introduce a lot of different people, you can use a channel to bring them in. You can also add data to this conversation and bring in apps, which we'll talk about in a moment, so you have that really rich experience of interacting between people and data as well. Channels can be public for maximum transparency, so you can have channels that anyone can join, and when they join it, they can have that record of that rich archive history. And this is perfect for new employees that are joining to get up to date on certain accounts or HR matters that they might want to learn about. Or channels can be private, and private channels allow you to restrict who's got access to specific information. If you have a very sensitive topic, perhaps you're working on an M&A or a complicated legal agreement, you wouldn't want that to be public. You can restrict those with private channels. Finally, channels can be shared, and this is a really powerful feature of the Slack platform. It is the ability for two organizations working on two separate Slack orgs to talk to one another in a secure way. You almost don't realize it. We put reminders in the product to show you that people are from different organizations, but that shared experience is extremely similar to what you would have just speaking internally, and you have all the security aspects of shared channels as well as the rich collaborative experience and the apps as well. So I mentioned a little bit, or we talked till now about how Slack is a substitute and a replacement for email in terms of communication. But what about from a platform perspective? Now, you may not think that email is a platform, but actually, as you start sharing data around an email, sending links around, screenshots, you're essentially using email as an input and an output from a data system. And essentially, that's what a platform is. You're integrating to other third-party tools and bringing that data in to one place. Well, sharing links around in email is not really the best way to go when you're sharing data. First of all, it's completely inefficient. So imagine I want to send a Salesforce report to somebody in email. I got to go log into Salesforce, find the report, get the link, paste it into the email, send it. The person receiving it needs to go click in Salesforce, authenticate, make sure they have access, maybe they don't. It's not the most efficient way to share data between two coworkers by any means. And I don't know about you, but like I'll go into Salesforce to do one thing, and then like 20 minutes later, it's like, what am I doing here? I get into that Salesforce rat hole. It's a rat hole I'm very familiar with. So the ability to take that data and instantly integrate in Slack and being able to access that data within Slack, that Salesforce data within a Slack channel, is incredibly powerful. And we have over 1,800 integrations today to different other SaaS providers, other technology companies. This also creates an integrated view of the data, and because you're not sharing it among small teams that are on threads, but ultimately, what's really valuable is that lack of context switching. So from a productivity perspective, from an efficiency perspective, the ability to stay in one tool where you spend all your time and use that tool to access all these different data sources is incredibly powerful. I mentioned some of the challenges around context switching. It is expensive, and it definitely slows people down. So as I said earlier, we have over 1,800 apps in our app directory. And people like Concur and others have chosen to build in the Slack app directory because they realize that that's where people spend their time. And we'll talk a little bit more about usage in a moment. What's also interesting to me and what's incredibly powerful is the over 600,000 registered developers that are on the Slack platform and building apps mostly for their own businesses and really delivering solutions on Slack for the business problems they have. So let me give you one example I'll give one example for me, from my life, and one example from a customer's life. So recently I was found to be out of compliance with our most recent security review. I assure you, I am not a bad actor. I was just sort of distracted. It's been a busy month. And what we've done is, internally, we've built a bot within our compliance team that will essentially find the people who are not in compliance and notify just those people that need to fill out the compliance, need to do the security review, educate them that, hey, this is happening, you need to click and move forward on this. And I got that notification, I clicked on it, I went into the system where I had to review the security aspects of the compliance requirements, I checked the boxes I needed to check, and I was done. But if you had to do that on email, you're blasting a lot of people, or you have to take the email from one system to another system. Building a bot allowed our users in an app, allowed our users to, or our compliance people to really laser focus into the right people they wanted to communicate with. I'll give you another example, which I love, from one of our customers. One of our customers makes guitars, and on the production floor, they have an IoT button. And when somebody on the floor experiences a problem on the floor, they press that button. It automatically talks to the Slack app that they built and sends a notification to the plant manager that tells them, this is what the issue is, this is where it happened, this is who pressed it, and they get all the context they need to solve that problem on their iPad. They walk over and they can go easily solve the problem at hand. So they don't need to do an email. They don't even need to pick up the phone. All that person needed to do to get the attention of their manager was pressing a button. So these are just two examples of the hundreds of thousands of apps that are out there solving real business problems for our users today. I mentioned the reason people are investing energy and time and money into developing these apps is because there's the understanding, as the VP of Platform from SAP Concur recognizes, that they want to build to where end users spend their lives. People at Concur know the deal. As an example, many people know the deal. As Concur users, I only go to Concur every once in a while if I have to fill out an expense report. And when I go, it's like I got to figure everything out. If there's ways that we can make the experience easier, and this is in Concur's mind, and we can create small apps and we can create an experience within Slack that accomplishes a bunch of what these folks are trying to do, we can make their lives simpler and easier. So that's why they make the investment to build on Slack. So speaking of adoption, we published a blog last week. I'm not sure if you all read it, but if you haven't, I highly encourage that you do. We published some new adoption numbers. So the most recent number that we published is we have over 12 million daily active users. with over 5 billion weekly actions. That weekly actions number is a new number that we've introduced that really highlights the fact that our users are not only logging in and trying or taking a look and opening our product, they're actually working deeply in Slack to solve their problems. They're posting messages, they're responding via React.js, and they are working with apps to get their job done. The other piece of data that I didn't share on this slide, but I think is incredibly compelling, is for our paid customers. Our paid customers on average, they have Slack open 9 hours a day, and they're in the product 90 minutes a day actively. They're actively using the product 90 minutes a day. So the adoption, this really speaks to what Mila mentioned earlier as that first core tenet of building for the user. We build a product that people love to use, and people are using at an incredibly high rate. We have a number of customers amongst those millions of users in a number of different industries. So ranging from highly secure industries such as FinServ and FinTech, we have Ameritrade and E-Trade, ASU and MIT on the higher ed side of things. These are just some examples. NASA, as we mentioned before, for the government, and Oracle and IBM being very large technology companies that are using our product every day. In fact, Oracle and IBM have over 100,000 people each in one Slack org, which is pretty incredible. There's I think the limit today is 250,000, and I'm sure that will grow over time. But you can fit basically all these people at one company in one Slack org, so that you don't have to rely on multiple tools to have collaboration between different groups. So you don't have to have one tool to do your announcements and one tool to manage a larger team. And having more and more tools becomes expensive, not just from a licensing perspective, but from a maintenance perspective, from an adoption perspective. The scale of Slack allows companies like IBM and Oracle to go really big and all the way and to touch every employee with this product. And furthermore, I know many of you are think a lot about security. At Slack, we've invested quite a bit recently in bolstering our security ecosystem. So we have data loss prevention and e-discovery tools that we have a whole ecosystem of them. So we support pretty much any one of those that your company uses. Will grow with your tool set. So if you choose to change, there's a good chance we'll have an integration, or we'll be building one to those different security tools. We also have encrypted key EKM, encrypted key management, which allows our customers to actually hold the keys and decide for themselves who can access which data. And so that's been an extremely powerful feature that enterprises all over the world have been adopting to help them manage these conversations and keep them secure. All right, before we bring on EA to talk a little bit about their experience with Slack and Zoom, I just wanted to reiterate a couple points and show an example of Slack and Zoom working together. So the integration, as Mila mentioned, has been around for a little bit of time. We've seen some rapid adoption. We have over 12,000 monthly active Slack teams using the integration, and that comes to around 200,000 monthly active Slack users. This is one of our strongest integrations, especially when it comes to business apps. Whenever we talk about integrations, we always have to remove Giphy from our conversation because everyone seems to use Giphy more than any other app. But nonetheless, it's a very popular integration, primarily because two things. Number one, both of our companies are really growing and being adopted at an incredible rate individually, but then also the integration is so simple. And here are some of the customers that have adopted this integration that are using this integration now. And as Mila mentioned, we're really trying to develop a seamless experience on launching a Zoom video conference from Slack. Let's take a look at one use case. I think for those of you who have sales teams or something like them, I think you know that they're notoriously cross-functional, kind of be hard to wrangle. The process of getting a deal to close can be pretty hairy, right? Well, at Slack, let's just walk through what this would look like with Slack and Zoom. So first, you would create a channel in Slack for this particular account. In this case, we're creating an account for the company EdgeCom. I believe that's a fictional company. I apologize to anyone here whose company's name is EdgeCom. But basically, you're going to create a channel for this particular account. You're going to add the right people that you need to close this deal. That could be AEs, or it could be salespeople, customer service, product people, legal, ops people, it really does take a ton of different people to get a deal done. And you can create that channel, invite the right people, and also connect the relevant apps. I mentioned our Salesforce integration. And again, we're talking about the ease of use here of getting the data to the right people at the right time. Here in this conversation, we have Noah and Jody talking about this deal. They're going back and forth. And then Noah says, or Jody says, hey, how about what's this guy's email address, or how do we get in touch with them? And it's as simple as typing in /Salesforce and then the person's name, and a record appears, and she can share it with the channel. Again, compare that to moving into Salesforce, finding the person, copying and pasting. It's just a much simpler experience, and it's so integrated and interwoven in the conversation that the data itself becomes a prime component of your collaboration. And our goal is to make these things as simple as possible so that you don't have to go around just to find a contact information, for example. Now, as contract agreements go and basic negotiation goes, obviously, at some point you're going to want to join and meet face-to-face. So in this case, Noah posted a Word document into the channel. There's some collaboration around it, and then Jennifer says, hey, let's jump on a Zoom call to close the loop. And again, it's as simple as typing in /Zoom. Type in /Zoom, a Zoom call block appears, and people can join directly from the channel into the meeting. Again, they don't have to go into Zoom. They don't have to start a meeting, copy the link, paste it back in. Doing everything from one channel is an extremely streamlined way of having this conversation. All right, so in a moment, we'll bring in Gopi Parampali, who runs IT at EA. Before we bring him on, I just want a quick introduction for EA. So EA, for those of you who are gamers, doesn't need an introduction, but Electronic Arts has been around since 1982, and it's come quite a long way since Donkey Kong, which is how I remember EA, and in general, I remember video games, so again, dating myself. But EA includes, they publish some of the biggest video game titles in the world, including FIFA and John Madden Football and Battlefield, and they have over 300 million registered players around the world. So you can imagine just the amount of operational intensity and requirements to keep that type of operation afloat, and just to publish the amount of games and to work cross-functionally together to build all these games. They operate out of 27 countries, and last year had a revenue of over $5 billion. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to pull out just to see time. This one isn't going. It's okay. But basically, the EA has operations all over the world to support their business. They have offices in Seattle and Sydney, Madrid, and Galway, all over the world. It's a super complicated business. It's probably not, but many of you this might seem familiar to you. You work in global organizations where you have different types of teams speaking different languages, different time zones, and how do you solve for this this big collaborative puzzle? So what EA has chosen to do is to adopt Slack and Zoom to work with them to build a collaborative solution that helps them get their work done. So this is the adoption of Slack at EA. This is over the last several years. You can see that they're up to 13,000 daily active users, which is a high number. But what's most interesting about that number to me is that there's only 10,000 people at EA. So those 3,000 people are essentially not EA employees, but they're contractors, they're artists, they're partners, people who aren't in the workspace as employees, but rather third-party businesses that they're working with to get stuff done. Now, they also send a ton of messages and upload a lot of files. Obviously, there's a lot of art to be reviewed, and the Slack platform can really help them get their job done across a wide scale. The Zoom adoption curve looks kind of similar, although it is compressed over a shorter amount of time. So this actually was since Zoom was adopted earlier this year. They're up to 42,000 monthly Zoom meetings and 180,000 monthly meeting participants. I also learned from one of the EA IT people that this resulted in one hug from a remote manager who was very excited about onboarding Zoom. So I didn't put the hug on there, but you get the idea. So what you'll notice, what's interesting to me again is the adoption's amazing, but these curves look pretty similar, right? Up and to the right, but in the beginning, there's this little period of time when there's organic adoption. And that's because these tools, again, the user-centric aspect and commitment of Slack and Zoom, what happens is people will discover these tools internally, they'll start using them internally, and becomes a great proving ground for a solution within the broader company as a whole. Eventually, sometimes they're using these tools in spite of IT mandate, but they use them nonetheless because they're available and they help people get their job done. And in the case of Zoom and Slack, this is something that was happening organically, and then finally it became something that has been picked up across the board. So, all right, without further ado, I'd love to introduce or welcome Gopi Parampali to the stage. Gopi, join us. All right. Hey, good to see you. I want to sit somewhere where people can see us. Yes. I think I'll sit right here. How are you doing today?
I'm okay.
And you have the mic there. Make sure. Let's see if it works.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
I'm sorry we couldn't teleport you up here. I was trying to work on it. Yeah. So, we heard a little bit about EA. We presented some of the challenges sort of globally. I'd love for you to just elaborate a little bit more on that and your experience at EA as you've seen it grow and some of the growing pains around collaboration and communication.
Okay, makes sense. So when the adoption of this is similar to what Don mentioned about this going up in a organic fashion. But if you look at most of the companies now, when the communication and collaboration tools don't work, the workforce and the teams there have a lot of options. It is not like where, in the past couple of years back, if you go back, you have tools that are only available from big vendors, and you needed, massive platform sales before you could pick something up. But that's not the case anymore. So what we had seen in the beginning was both for Slack as well as for Zoom, we started seeing this as one of the many small vendors and outside tools people would pick up. But then what we started noticing was we were just waiting to see, okay, who's going to take over and who's going to grow here, for two reasons. One, we didn't want to just go invest in all the tools, because then in the process you are creating all these islands of information and a lot of friction that basically happens because different people are using different tools. So after watching the whole trend sometime, and we decided we're going to do evaluation of all these tools and the platforms that are out there to see, who is basically focused on offering a friction-free experience for the workforce, where things, for example, starting a meeting shouldn't be like, operating a rocket, or exchanging information with others, shouldn't be a complex, science or arts project. So that's what we were looking at. So when we started evaluating the tools and technology that's out there that helps people kind of work together in a friction-free format, that's when both Slack and Zoom, surfaced to the top. So that's when we decided, it's time for us to kill all the other ways of interacting and collaborating with each other, and that's when we adopted Slack and Zoom. So that's why you see initially a little bit of adoption where we were piloting and the users were using this in different pockets, but then all of a sudden, once we decided to go full in on these tools, that's when you started seeing the enterprise-wide adoption.
And what can you say about the adoption within the pilots, or just in general, when you turn this on? What do you notice happening, the users that you put on it?
So for two things. One, the way when I basically just go and probe different users during this phase of adoption, people had very positive feedback. For example, let's pick on Slack as an example. How it changed the business processes to move from, let's say, email to direct messaging, or having a persistence of the, interaction history, in the channels, in the workspaces. And then you pick Zoom, then basically how easy it is to do a video conferencing, not just audio conferencing, and how easy it is to share content, how easy it is to kind of get the integration done with, other multiple devices. multiple device formats. It is a very refreshing change from what I used to hear when I basically would ask the users about their experiences. It's fundamentally a shift from friction-filled collaboration, working together experience to more of a friction-free experience. Of course, this doesn't happen automatically. I mean, for example, just putting a tool out there doesn't change it. You also have to work with the users on making these tools work in the context of the processes that they use. For example, if you refer to, let's say, how sprint planning works. So whether it's Slack or Zoom, you got to figure out how, instead of thinking of them as tools or platforms in isolation as a technology, you got to basically make it work for them as part of these business processes.
Cool, and that's where the platform comes in
Yes,
and the ability to
absolutely.
integrate
Yep.
with all the different tools. You mentioned the pilot and you mentioned the sentiment. I'm just curious to hear, I'm sure a lot of people in this room think about like how they justify or how they measure success of this rollout and the collaboration tools out there, and if they're thinking about maybe even purchasing some of these tools, how they justify that internally. I'd love to get your thoughts on how you do that at
Yeah.
EA.
So I think there are two parts to the question. One was, what are the measures of success? And the second one is more about, how do you go about putting something like this in place?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the first part. What does the good look like? What's the measure of success here? Or what makes you call this, rollout a success? For most of the times, if you look at the IT metrics, pure IT metrics, on-time delivery, within budget, zero defects, that tends to be your metrics. But they are metrics of the process that you're using to get something out to the users. But to me, that's a secondary metrics. The metrics that really matters, the two metrics that really matter, one is adoption. In the sense, are the users using this tool for getting their job done? That's number one. Second thing is, are they able to get it done because they love the product, or because IT or somebody up there mandated it? So those are the two metrics. Those are the only two metrics that matter. It took us some time to kind of shift our gears into that kind of mindset. The good thing is, with EA, embracing digital and embracing the world of SaaS and embracing the culture of players at the very center of what we do, we took a similar approach. For workforce and the employees shouldn't feel that they have to adopt something because IT rolled out a product. Right? So adoption and basically the quality of the products that we roll out. So that's number one. Those are the two metrics that we care about. So that's a measure of success. The second part of it. How we go about doing this. Now, I've been in the industry for about 25 years now, in the software and IT industry. Different companies use different processes, so I wouldn't necessarily say the process that we used is the only process that works, or it's the only process that you should use. But for us, we didn't start with, okay, let's go look at a tool to solve collaboration communication problem. We started identifying the friction points for our employees. Where do they lose their time? So if think of this as employee experience being a way to offer a friction-free experience for people to work together in the company, together and make sure that they have a great experience in doing that, and they don't have to dread coming to work every day. So you want to make sure that we don't offer the technology and the process and the people. We don't put friction in place. We actually have to eliminate the friction. So we started looking at how people exchange information. What do they do to get their job done? Starting from analyzing mail, starting from how easy or difficult it is to set up meetings, how people inside the company work with people outside the company, even just a cross-functional collaboration. We started identifying these friction points, and we started characterizing what the productivity hit is. And unfortunately, some of these were caused by some of the tools we had put in place, the enterprise tools, without necessarily paying attention to the impact it had on productivity. So then we started looking at, okay, if we were to use the experience of our employees and the productivity of their employees, if we are very precious about it, then what kind of tools are out there that offer the best experience? And then once we identify them, in this case, Slack and Zoom for this problem space, then it became easier conversation about, okay, here is the problem, because it's a real problem. All our general managers and the employees could get behind, and then basically presenting a business case after that was more of a numbers exercise. But we had to get through the initial hurdle of let's go gather the data on what the impact on the experience is. So that's what we did.
Starting with the experience, you're looking for finding areas of friction. I think that's a really great approach. Maybe time for 2 quick questions,
Sure.
And we'll have Mila come in and join us. So what can you say about the rollout of these 2 products, and what was similar about them, what was different, and just in general, like your experience with deploying Zoom and Slack at a large scale?
A couple of things. So again, we don't necessarily, we never called, the Slack was an adoption, organic adoption. So it was a slightly different story than Zoom. But when we started discovering that this was getting adopted rapidly and very fast, just to give you some sense, let's say you have about 13,000 workforce, 10,000 employees, and 3,000 external. About 5,000 to 8,000 was done even before IT ever showed up in the scene. Right, so it's a pretty organic adoption, but then what we had to do is, we said, from this point to kind of drive the enterprise adoption, we did a multiple waves of campaigning on kind of driving the adoption. When it comes to Zoom, we never framed it as a Zoom conversation, whether it is with our execs or with our employees. We call it EA Connect internally, so it's basically Zoom, in combination working with a bunch of other tools, all of these things integrated together so that there is no friction in moving from, conference room to mobile to your desk. So mobile to boardroom experience, fairly consistent, right? And then integration of these with the Slack and a whole bunch of other technologies that we have, all of these working together is what we offered. So of course, we had to start with the user experience and the use case scenarios, personas. So starting from there to more of a product-centric approach of, what's the MVP look like, and what's the release 1, release 2, release 3. And then along with it, we drove all of these as marketing campaigns. We never took a traditional approach of, we're going to roll out a tool, and if the users come along, that's great. Otherwise, it's not our problem. That's not the approach we took. So we took more of a campaigning approach with all of these projects.
Cool, and I'm sure the Zoom and the Slack folks helped you along with that.
Yes, absolutely.
And the customer success teams.
If it wasn't a great partnership, trust me, I wouldn't be here.
Okay, great. There you have it. So one last question, just before we'll bring Mila up in a moment to wrap up. But what would you like to see more from Zoom and Slack?
I'm sure you are just getting started, so I'm fairly certain there is a lot more space to cover. So for example, how do you integrate Zoom and Slack more closer than, for example, starting a call and all that? So that's one. The second thing is I hope to see a day where Zoom chat gets integrated with Slack chat, and then also think about, for example, if you are having conversations on a Zoom call, you want to see that translated into all text, kind of speech to voice, voice to text conversion, and probably get them back into Slack so that you could start tracking actions. If it is any action, if it is a problem-solving meeting, then you want to eventually get that all back into Slack and then basically trigger workflows from there.
Yep.
So there is a lot to do. I mean, I'm not even scratching the surface on things that you can do with the AI, ML to identify the patterns where we could understand the friction points and then basically drive things up from there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Gopi, for joining us. Really appreciate you spending your time with us. Mila, you want to bring us home?
Thank you, Gopi.
Thank you.
Here you
Awesome.
go. Thanks. We're going to go exit.
All right, so just one moment, and thanks so much, Gopi. We really appreciate you coming over and sharing your experience with using both Zoom and Slack, and being one of the cutting-edge customers that we really, really, truly appreciate. And actually, just a quick show of hands, how many of you are already using Zoom and Slack? How many of you, oh wow, okay. How many, I should revert this question then, how many of you are not using Slack? All right, okay, great. So, and how many of you have tried the integration? All right, great. How many of you have upgraded to the latest one? So the one that we just rolled out, I'll give you a quick demo in case you haven't upgraded to it. We were the first partner to take advantage of Slack Calls API. This is their latest API enhancement. And essentially what it allows to do is once the conversation happens in the shared channel, and shared channel, honestly, it's one of the most wonderful features because it allows companies, 2 different companies, to collaborate on a project or a specific issue. It's very easy and seamless to add somebody external from your organization and start the conversation. Both of these companies need to be both paid Zoom and Slack customers. And once this integration is enabled by an admin, it's super easy. Once the conversation happens on the channel and somebody is not clear what needs to happen, they can propose to meet instead of typing messages back and forth. And with this simple command, Don says sure. At this point, he's ready to meet. With a simple command, you can name a meeting, something like Zoom plus Slack sync up, and then launch a Zoom meeting. That integration existed before. What we added with the latest one, the latest update to our integration, is the call block that actually gives you a very rich summary as far as what's happening in the call. It also shows you, when you're not yet joined the meeting, it shows you who else already is in there. And you can actually better prepare before diving into the call, knowing that there is already quite a few people. And once the call happened and everybody left the meeting, we give you a summary. In this case, this call was, it lasted for 26 minutes and the 6 people joined. For those in IT who need to track this information, it's actually very valuable to understand how many people actually join meetings from Slack and how much time is spent on the calls and meetings. But also, what's available is if the meeting was recorded, now this meeting transcript is sent back to a channel where those people who actually, maybe they were supposed to join, but they didn't have a chance, they can go back to the call, they can go back to the transcript, and now watch it right there from Slack. So this is available today, and if you haven't upgraded already, I prompt you to go to either Zoom App Marketplace at marketplace.zoom.us or Slack App Marketplace and download it from there. The latest version is available now. But we didn't stop there. And what we're excited to show you is the next thing that's coming. In this case, I'm sure you heard it at the keynote earlier today. Zoom Phone is a very important product for us. It's a new strategic direction for us where we're expanding beyond meeting solution. We are going into the adjacent communication area such as phone. My colleague Vi, who leads the product management for Zoom Phone, in this case, him and I are talking about Zoomtopia slides. But sometimes it's just too much to just type. Let's say I'm on the go somewhere in the public transport when I'm not ready to take a meeting. In this case, I'll propose that we just jump on a call. And we're adding /Zoom phone command. So it's very different from /Zoom that launches a meeting. This /Zoom phone command will launch a phone call. And in this case, what will happen is the modal, this is a new feature in Slack, by the way, plug for that. Those of you who are developers in the audience, this is a really cool user experience improvement where the modal will pop up, and we're the first partner to take advantage of the modal. And it would verify, in this case, Vi has multiple phone numbers. It will verify which phone number I should call. So we avoid any type of confusion. In this case, this is the right phone number. Vi is just straight A's, very lucky guy. Straight 8s. And I click call, and from that point on, we call the Zoom client, and it's already in the active calling mode. So there's a very familiar beeping sound, and hopefully Vite picks up. So as soon as the call is finished, we'll also get the summary confirmation, and there will be the ability to see how long the call lasted. So that's the one-on-one calling functionality. We're also adding a similar functionality to the channel. So in this case, you don't need to switch. And going back to the user experience principles, how it matters to us to make it super easy and frictionless to launch a call. So no matter where you are in one-on-one conversation or if you're in the channel, you'll be able to type a familiar, by this point hopefully, /Zoom phone command. And in that case, it will launch a similar modal, and it will present you with a list of people in the channel. And in this case, Vi is my favorite, and I'd like to start a phone call with him. It'll go back to the prompt where the system would ask me if that's indeed the phone number that I would like to call. And as soon as I click the call button, we go to familiar Zoom interface where it's in the calling state. So that is the integration that's coming by the end of this year. It'll be available in general availability, and those of you who haven't tried Zoom Phone yet, we encourage you to do so. And those of you who haven't tried Slack yet, we encourage you to try it along with Zoom. Thank you so much, and that's a wrap for right now, and hope you enjoy the rest of Zoomtopia, and hope to see you at other breakout sessions.